because there have been cases where even bios have been submitted and that person doesn't know. Yeah, you wouldn't need to do it because the assumption is you wrote it. But the rest of everyone else, I would recommend to submit the 2 cents and don't change a word on it. Yeah, like as written in the project.
Hello, I see you.
Good. Whoops. I'm on my laptop. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you great. Absolutely. And so Dr. Hartline will get on as well, and she will introduce you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will make you host. I started the recording now just so we can have everything. And did you get the link to the informal conversation for afterwards?
I did.
So even if we close down an hour earlier than 5 o'clock our time, I will go right to starting that link so you can get on at any point.
Okay.
I know one of our professors will have a class of, it'll just look like he's on there, but there's about 25 students that will be there as well. So thought I'd give you a heads up.
All right, thanks. Let me, can I share? I can't quite, I don't think I can share screen.
I'm gonna make you host,
Okay.
and then you'll be able to share the screen.
I'm going to try it. I just want to see if we have the same issues as yesterday. So does that look fine?
That looks, once again, I think it was my laptop because I can see them on my computer screen here at work. Wonderfully, it takes up most of the screen. So
Okay, I think that it wasn't your laptop. I think I worked with my admin, and there was a problem with my big monitor, so I'm on my laptop.
oh, nice, wonderful. Looks like we're starting to get people in, and so hopefully when Dr. Hartline comes on, then she'll talk to you a little bit. She'll do the introduction, and I'll be here watching the chat and watching my phone for any issues with people who can't get on or anything like that. So
I won't monitor the chat.
that's perfectly fine. Either Dr. Hartline or I or somebody else from Montana Tech will try to stop to ask a question if they need it done right then, but you can let them know that that we'll save the questions till the end, and we do have an informal chat, and I'm sure Dr. Hartline will let them know in her introduction as well.
Okay. I have my mug.
Oh, you got it. I'm so glad you did. That one is my favorite mug, actually.
Well, so I like this mug because it holds 2 cups, right?
Right. And I'm so glad I packed it just fine too, because I never know. I'm like, okay, I'll try to do a box within a box and bubble wrap, but
No, you did a good job packing it.
wonderful. And also I've sent out several messages today because we have an interview search going on. So my email is packed, but I wanted to make sure that if you haven't done it already, if you can submit that video submission form.
I have not done that yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Then I didn't miss anything yet.
No.
Good afternoon.
Hey,
It's great to see a bunch of people here. And wonderful. You're even the host. That means you'll be able to share your screen.
okay.
So, without further ado, I'm Beverly Hartline. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research and the Dean of the Graduate School at Montana Technological University, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to Montana Tech's first public lecture of our Spring 2021 program. Now, the program this spring is planned to all be available by Zoom only. While we're disappointed not to be able to bring these phenomenal speakers to campus, this remote format has allowed us to attract and prepare for you a really star-studded program with 2 Nobel laureates, 2 recent NSF directors, and other national, international, and local speakers on a very broad range of topics. We're particularly delighted to welcome Raina Maier as our first speaker because she was in fact scheduled to visit us last April, below what happened to travel planned for April. Before I go very much further, I want to alert everyone that this program is being recorded and it will be available through Montana Tech's Digital Commons library for people who haven't been able to make it. I would also like to ask everyone, except Raina, to turn off your cameras and turn off your microphones and not send any chat messages to all, because that can be very distracting to the speaker. I would also like to ask you, if you're not watching alone, could you please send a text to Victoria Pagan in the chat? You send a chat only to Victoria Pagan that tells her how many people are there with you in your locale, so we can get a rough estimate. We have 35 different internet connections, but we would like also to have a rough estimate of the attendance, because we have a couple programs that are particularly interested in sponsoring this talk, and that will apply to others as well. This talk is part of some academic courses and seminars at Montana Tech, so I think various places we have groups of students watching. And for today's talk, I want to thank Montana's NIH INBRE program and Montana's NSF EPSCoR Cruise project for sponsoring the talk. It's a great pleasure today to welcome Dr. Raina Maier to Montana Tech virtually. And if you haven't been to Butte, we really need to get you to Butte, because if you're interested in mining damage and restoration, we probably have one of the best locations in the country for studying that. Raina's bachelor's degree is in biology and chemistry from the University of Minnesota, and her PhD is in microbiology from Rutgers. She is an award-winning professor at the University of Arizona in more departments than I can count, but one of them is environmental science, and there are, I think, pathology there's a whole bunch of departments that she's part of. She's teaches courses, but importantly here, she's the director of the Superfund Research Center there, which I think has been active possibly for more than 20 years. Is that correct?
31 years. We're in our 31st year.
31st year, and you've been the director since the beginning?
No, I haven't been here. I haven't been here that long. I have been
okay.
Associate director or director since 2002.
Yeah, so that's almost 20 years. Anyway, the Superfund Research Center there, which at least a few years ago, it was one of the only Superfund Research Center that paid any attention to metals other than arsenic.
That's correct.
And her research center has long focused on the health and environmental impacts and remedies related to metal mining and their impact. And her talk today is on revegetation of mine wastes, lessons learned, and stakeholder communication. So please, everybody, make sure your cameras and your microphones are off. And I'm going to turn everything over to Raina.
All right. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. So is that looking all right?
It looks
Yes,
great.
it looks great.
Okay.
I should say, people, you can control how big her screen is on your screen by stretching out your picture and then moving to one side or the other the the little line between the picture of her and right now the picture is of Victoria, and we need to get the picture of Raina showing.
Okay. I'm going to start. So Dr. Hartline, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to give this talk, and I want to show you all. I got a Montana Tech mug because I couldn't travel to visit with you this time. I really do hope in the future that I can come to Montana Tech and actually meet some of you in person. So I'm going to talk to you today about what I've learned about revegetation of mine wastes over the last 15 or 20 years. The lessons learned not only in terms of research, but also in terms of stakeholder communication. And in today's talk, I'm going to really focus on communication with the mining industry. So the outline for my talk is I'll start with what are some of the challenges of sustainable mining. And then I will move into the research that we've done at one particular legacy site called the Iron King Mine and Humboldt Smelter Superfund site and the lessons we've learned there. And then I'm going to talk about the issues at modern sites and how we can apply lessons learned from the legacy site research that we've done to modern sites, and how we are doing this in the context of a center that I helped found, the Center for Environmentally Sustainable Mining, which uses a partnership approach with the mining industry to understand and solve remediation challenges that they face. So residual mine waste is one of the largest waste streams in the world. And there are recent accidents, in fact, 36 major mine tailings dams failures since 2010. And by my estimate, that's 3 to 4 major mine tailings dams failures per year. And these failures highlight the importance of improving the science and engineering of treating these waste streams. And I want to give you a little bit of shock and awe since I can't be there with you. I want to show you a couple of videos of what these mine tailings dams failures are doing. So let me start with this. I'm afraid you're going to see a little bit of a ad to begin with, but be patient. This is the Mount Poly mine in British Columbia, Canada, and they had a catastrophic mine tailings dam failure. And what you're seeing is the result of that catastrophic failure moving into what is a pristine environment, knocking down trees, moving through the forest. Every time I watch this, and I've watched it many times, it boggles my mind. This is actually the mine tailings dam itself. You're looking at here at the break, the failure, and the tailings moving out. And now you're looking the other way into the mine tailings dam. Again, this is the mine tailings failure. This is the mine tailings dam itself. I think this is interesting because it shows you that these are huge, enormous sites. They can be, 1,000 to 2,000 acres for a single mine tailings dam. This is the plume moving through the nearby river that it's traversed to, and you can see in the background, way up here, you can see the mine tailings break. Here again is the plume. And again, just the vastness of this mine tailings dam with the break in this upper corner. Okay. So I'd like to show you one more, and this is a failure in Brazil, and this is a bauxite mine tailings dam. Bauxite is the tailings that come from processing of aluminum. They must have had a camera trained on the site because you can actually see the breakage as it's occurring. And this is just, again, amazing at the sheer volume and magnitude of what's happening. This spill actually went through a town and killed 259 people. And it's not hard to imagine. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and you're going to see the mine tailings coming in from the left. And you're going to see some vehicles up here that are actually seeing the mine tailings come, and they're going to turn around and try and get out of the way. But again, the sheer magnitude of these spills is amazing. Okay. So it's not that the remediation work that I have been doing or been part of is going to solve the catastrophic failures you just saw. Those are engineering issues. But the environmental consequences of these large volumes moving into the environment, as well as our legacy sites and modern mine tailing sites, are what I'm interested in. Because both in Mount Poly and in Brazil, people are going to have to go in and do some remediation efforts. Mining industry and investors are very concerned. Just late last year, the International Council on Mining and Metals, the United Nations Environment Program, and the Principles for Responsible Investment have gotten together to release new thought and guidance on mining. It's very expensive to begin a new mine nowadays. It costs upwards of $50 million just to begin a mine before you even start mining. And investors want to know that their investment is not going to be at high risk because the types of catastrophes I just showed you wipe out any profits, surely. So let's get to the meat of the talk and what are mine waste reclamation strategies. So the traditional strategy is cap and plant. And cap and plant requires a full topsoil cover to be emplaced on the mine tailings. And that requires, and think of this 1,000 to 2,000 acre tailings dam. So that requires that you denude an area of its topsoil in order to harvest the cover that you can put on the tailings. You then grow the vegetative cover within the topsoil, and this sort of physically isolates the mine tailings from the environment. And so the mine tailings sort of stay what they are in perpetuity. It's subject to erosional processes, especially water erosion. And so often you have to go in and remanage the site occasionally. But it is the standard method that is accepted by the Environmental Protection Agency at this point in time. A newer method, one that we have been looking at and studying, is phytostabilization. And phytostabilization is the incorporation of soil amendments into the tailings. So you mix them together to improve fertility. And then you seed that mixture, that amended mine tailings. And the vegetative growth is growing in the mine tailings and permanently changes the tailings properties into something that is more suitable to support plant growth. At least that's the goal. This technique stabilizes mine tailings materials from both wind and water erosion. So I'm going to tell you about a phytostabilization project that we did at the Iron King Mine and Humboldt Smelter Superfund site. This is a legacy site, what's termed a legacy site. And it is in sort of central Arizona, here the star. There is two parts to the Superfund site. There's a now defunct smelter with highly contaminated soil around in this area in green. And there is our study site, which is surrounded in red here. And this comprises a mine tailings site that's about 150 acres in size, so relatively small to the Mount Poly site that you are looking at. Across the highway is the town of Dewey-Humboldt, and this town has about 4,000 residents. The issue with the mine tailings, the Iron King mine tailings, is that they're highly acidic, pH 2 to 3, and they have huge concentrations of metals, including arsenic, lead, and zinc, greater than 3,000 milligrams per kilogram. So the tailings at the Iron King site are known as pyritic tailings because they are iron sulfide ores. And the tailings are what's left over after you take these ores and you crush them very finely and you process them to take out the valuable metals, which at Iron King were copper and silver and gold, and I think even zinc. And so what you've got left over after this processing is this finely crushed ore that's like flour or a very fine grained sand that has heavy metals, acidic pH, and completely lacks any nutrients, any carbon, organic matter, and nitrogen. And so nothing grows on these materials. On the left is a picture taken of the Iron King tailings in 1950. And on the right is a picture of the Iron King tailings taken a few years ago. And the only difference is that the latter picture is in color because it's easy to take color pictures nowadays. Nothing grows on these materials. And so we did several years of greenhouse studies to see if we could put compost, mixed compost into the Iron King tailings to allow plants to grow. And based on our greenhouse work, we went to the field and we started a compost-assisted direct planting field study. And so you can see this as a Google Earth picture. You can actually see the field plot. It's a randomized block design of 6 treatments, 0, 10, 15, 20% compost with or without seeds. The only place that it's not randomized is these 2 plots, and these 2 plots are the 0 compost plots because we were afraid if we put them in the center, we would slop compost into them. It's really hard with a tractor. And you can see in the bottom right corner, after about a year, this is after a rain, you can see a rainbow, the vegetative caps actually were quite robust. And this graph shows the percent canopy cover achieved versus compost amendment rate, either 10, 15, or 20% compost. And the color of the bars relates to the year. So red is 2010, all the way going to blue, which is 2015. So we measured canopy cover each year. And the dashed line is the canopy cover in the off-site vegetation, which is shown in this picture in the lower right-hand side. It's about 30%. So what you can see is that with 10% compost, after year 1, we achieved the off-site vegetation canopy cover of about 30%. But after that, although not statistically declining, you see what we think is a real decline in the vegetative cover over the next 5 years. For 15% compost, we also achieved a 30% canopy cover in the first year. And the difference between 15 and 10% is that it sort of maintained much more closely at this 30% level. And 20% canopy cover also started out at 30%, or 20% compost also started out at 30% canopy cover, but then jumped up to somewhere between 50 and 60% for the latter years. So these results show that a single application of compost immediately impacted the properties of the mine tailings, increasing pH, improving the levels of nutrients, including organic matter and nitrogen, and also provided an inoculum of microorganisms that support plant growth. The greenhouse results scaled very effectively to the field for all of the key parameters we were looking at. So we were really encouraged by that. And the compost helped transition this highly disturbed matrix, these mine tailings, into a substrate that was able to support plant germination and growth for these 6 years. However, of course, there's always a but. There were areas where erosion and ponding occurred, and this seemed to accelerate acidification process in localized areas. And when that happened, that impacted the ability of plants to survive. And so it indicates that remediation has to be monitored and supplemented over the long term. So maybe a single application will not be enough to maintain a site. So what we're worried about is whether we can protect human health. I mentioned earlier that the town of Dewey-Humboldt is right across the highway, and in fact, the direction of the wind takes the dust from this site right into the town. And EPA has actually had to already do two sets of yard removals in the town because of high levels of arsenic and lead in the soils. And I want to show you this video, which just speaks 1,000 words in showing you what happens every day at this site, usually in the morning. You see dust moving across and entrained into the air. And as it's moving, it's going across the highway and into the town of Dewey-Humboldt. And remember that these materials have 3,000 or more milligrams per kilogram of arsenic, lead, and zinc, just to name a few of the materials. Okay, so here we are. So we wanted to measure whether indeed the plant cover that we placed in the tailings could reduce dust emissions. And to do this, we measured horizontal dust flux. And we chose 4 different sites on the tailings. One, I'm pointing to the upper right-hand side here. One was an unirrigated control that did not have a plot. One was an irrigated control, which is the lower right plot here. One was a plot with 16% canopy cover, which is this one in the upper right-hand corner. And one was a plot that achieved a 32% canopy cover, which is this one right below the 16%. And again, the wind direction is primarily going from the lower right-hand side to the upper left-hand side. And so we emplaced passive samplers in the lower right-hand corners of each of these plots, and a second set of samplers in the upper left-hand corner of each of the plots. So you could measure the air coming in and then out of the plots. The passive samplers were set up on stands, and they ranged from, they had passive jars that collected dust ranging from just above the soil surface to 1 meter above the soil surface. So, excuse me, above the soil surface. And so this graph shows the results of that experiment, which was performed over a year. We replaced the collection apparatus 3 times during that year. So each collection was 3 to 4 months in length. And this graph shows the average horizontal dust flux in grams per meter squared per year as a function of treatment. And so if you first look at the unirrigated control treatment in red, you can see that has the highest dust emission, about 2,400 grams per meter squared per year. followed by the irrigated plot. But the plots that had vegetation, including both the 16% canopy cover and the 32% canopy cover, actually kept dust, actually deposited dust within the plot, meaning that there was less dust coming out of the plot than coming into the plot, meaning that the plants were actually trapping dust on the foliage. So we were really excited. We were establishing a vegetative cap. That vegetative cap was preventing dust from moving off the site, thereby protecting human and ecosystem health. But we were concerned with the areas that were failing in the plots, and wanted to think about and explore why one application of compost wasn't enough to remediate the site. So in thinking about this, research suggests that for legacy acid generating sites, the tailings microbiome may govern the success or failure of the plant cover. Recall that when we add compost, we're adding a whole new microbiome, one that should be plant supporting. But the original microbiome in this highly acidic site is a very happy, healthy, stable microbiome of acidophilic microorganisms. So it really comes down to a story of warring microbes. Again, mine tailings are a stable and healthy environment for acidophiles who get their energy from reduced iron and sulfur in the pyritic ore. So what these organisms do is to oxidize iron and sulfur. They generate energy to fix carbon dioxide, much like plants do with light energy, and that's how they create their food. And when you have a pyrite ore that is exposed to oxygen, you get a very slow abiotic process that allows release of iron. And that iron also generates, when that iron is released, it generates release of sulfate and hydrogen ions, which generate acid and ultimately form acid mine drainage. This is a very slow process, actually, abiotically, above pH 4.5 or 5. It happens really, really slowly, but once you hit that 4.5 pH, microbes start to participate and take over. And in increasingly acidic conditions, the reaction goes faster and faster, catalyzed by microbes. So these reactions result in the acidification of mine tailings and any water that comes in contact. This in turn releases heavy metals into the environment. So in the top right picture, you see a stream that's affected by acid mine drainage. Once the pH goes below pH 5, plants don't like to grow. These systems can last for decades to centuries. The Bonita mining district is a really good example. The Gold King mine, not to be confused with Iron King, the Gold King mine is in the Bonita mining district, and EPA was working at the Gold King site. And by mistake, they had bulldozers there. They opened an adit, which is just basically a tunnel into the area that had been mined into the hill. Over the years, that tunnel had filled with acid mine drainage, and they released 3 million gallons of acid mine drainage into the nearby Animas River and turned it yellow. So that's the picture on the bottom. But as I learned in a Senate hearing about the Gold King mine spill, this whole Bonita mining district, which comprises about 48 legacy mine sites, releases on a daily basis a mind-boggling 5.4 million gallons of acid mine drainage. So Acid mine drainage is well studied, and its microbial components is really well studied at pH 2 to 3. Not well studied at pH that ranges from 3 up to 6. And that is really what we're kind of interested in looking at the failures at the Iron King mine. So we went back to look at these warring microbes, the acidophiles versus the plant growth promoting microbes, using samples that we had collected from the Iron King mine field study between 2010 and 2017. And again, I just want to show you these pictures. Year 1, we have a really robust plant cover in the center. And at year 3, you can see these areas that have acidified and sort of killed the plants, even though there are still areas where the plant cover is still very, very robust. So again, compost amendment adds not only carbon and nitrogen and carbon and nutrients, but adds plant growth promoting microbes. And we wanted to look at the interaction between all the microbes in this site. So our objective was to look at the community dynamics within these acidic mine tailings during the 6-year study we completed. Additionally, we completed a microcosm experiment to identify specific microbial taxa involved in developing and maintaining acidic conditions between pH 3 and 6 when iron and sulfur are present. So let me show you some of those results. Here again is the field study design. This is our same plot. The stars indicated where the cores that we used for this study. I will present some geochemical parameters that we measured, not all of them, but pH and plant cover. And I will also show you the microbiome data we have as analyzed by ITAG sequencing of the 16S rRNA gene. So the graph on the left shows the microbial taxa recovered from all of the samples we analyzed. And they statistically divided into 5 groups. And interestingly, those groups relate to acidity and plant cover if you look on the right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, we have pH on the top and percent plant cover on the bottom as a function of these 5 groups. And you can see for groups 1, 2, and 3, in each case, the pH is higher and the plant cover is higher. But for groups 4 and 5, pH is declining and the plant cover is declining. Another way to look at the data in this graph, the groups graph, is to create a taxonomic analysis or a taxonomic tree. And so these data are the same on the left and the right, again, via group. And I show this to you only because you're going to see it now in the next slide, which is the most complex slide I'm going to show you today. Here we have the groups that I was talking about, 1 through 5. And on the right-hand side, we have the distribution of when the samples were taken. And so you can see that group 1, the taxa, the family from group 1, only were sampled in 2010 after the compost amendment. And we never saw those taxa again. And as you move through groups 2 through 5, you can see that the sample distribution skews more to the right as you move down the groups. So for group 5, the majority of samples came at the very end. All right, so what does this mean for the types of microorganisms that we see in these samples? I'm going to cover up part of this graph right now. I'm going to first look at the dominant acidophilic iron and sulfur oxidizers that we found in this site. And their names are in the blue box along the top. And in the green and white represents a heat map, which is log relative abundance. The lighter the color, the less the abundance. The darker green the color, the higher the abundance. And so what you can see is that group 1 and group 2 had much lower abundances of iron and sulfur oxidizers than did groups 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to uncover the plant growth promoting microbe box. So these are the dominant families of plant growth promoting microbes. And you can see that they predominate in groups 1, 2, and 3, and are almost absent from groups 4 and 5. And so plant growth promoting microbes were winning the war at the beginning of this experiment in 2010, 11, and 12, but started losing the war as the acidophiles took over later in the latter years of the experiment. To look at exactly who is driving these processes, the student, and John Hottenstein is his name, that ran both of these experiments, set up a microcosm made of sand and clay. He amended these microcosms either with iron or with sulfur or with a combination of iron and sulfur, and inoculated it with mine tailings from the site. He sampled every 2 weeks to capture the iron and sulfur oxidizing communities. And we, again, looked at those with ITAG sequencing. He did 2 experiments. I'm not showing you the first one. The first one just showed that the acidification process does not occur under abiotic or autoclave conditions. It only occurs under biotic conditions. And the second experiment is shown here. What he did was to set up under each condition, iron, iron, sulfur, sulfur, to set up 2 sets of microcosms, one at pH 2.5 and one at pH 4.5. The pH 2.5 experiments didn't need to be treated or buffered. They stayed right at pH 2.5. The pH 4.5 experiments kept wanting to decline in pH. So you can see on the right here under panel A that he added, at each of these arrows, he added a buffer to bring the pH up and to keep the system at about pH 4.5. So the outcome of his analysis of the communities that developed in these microcosms were that there were very distinct communities in the moderately acidic versus the highly acidic microcosms. And so you can see that here. The red circle is around highly acidic samples, and the black circle is around moderately acidic samples. And you can even look at who these are. Under moderately acid conditions, these 4 families, these first 4 families dominated. Under highly acidic conditions, the latter 4 families dominated. And I will tell you that Leptospirillum and Acetophilic are the 2 most well-studied organisms associated with acid mine drainage. They're very, very well known. But there's a lot less known about these organisms that appeared under moderately acidic conditions. And so what we think is happening is that we have the tailings, which after a compost amendment start here at a neutral or slightly acidic pH. There's a lot of organic matter present. And you have these families that are shown to be participating in iron and sulfur oxidation that are chemoorganic trophic. That means they need organic carbon, and they serve to start using the compost. And as the compost declines, they give rise to a new community of mixotrophic organisms that can operate either chemoorganotrophically or chemolithotrophically, oxidizing iron or sulfur. And these organisms serve to decrease the pH even more and scavenge any remaining organic matter that's left. And that allows the climax community to develop, which are the Leptospirillum and Acetophilic. And these organisms are actually inhibited when organic matter is present. So this is a community, a food chain that is set up, that is built for the success of this community in the end to be, to be Leptospirillum and Acetophilobacillus. John did one last thing, and that was to take the taxa that he identified from the microcosms. This is the left, the purple graph. And he did a correlation between those and pH. And he actually got a very good correlation. And so the thought is that you can then use that microbial, those taxa as biomarkers for what the field pH will be and what the outcome of your plants and what the success of your plants will be. And they are much better predictors than the Acetophilobacillus and Leptospirillum, which are the organisms we know as acidophiles. They are fairly poor predictors of the field pH. So in conclusion, the mine tailings acidification process is very complex. We think it can be controlled by organic matter addition, and in spots you may need to do several organic matter additions. We believe that legacy sites treated in this manner will require long-term monitoring, but I think even a cap and plant site would require long-term monitoring, so I'm not sure that makes a big difference. We think that the combined insights of understanding soil microbiome dynamics and above ground plant growth will make us more effective managers for the long-term success of mine tailings reclamation. So it became clear to me that we need to be able to tell the mining industry about this work and how it might impact them. And so in 2011, I worked with Mary Polton, who was then the director of the Institute for Mineral Resources at the University of Arizona. And we co-founded the Center for Environmentally Sustainable Mining to translate these innovative ideas into practice. Current director is Dr. Julie Nielsen. She took over in 2017 and is doing an amazing job at keeping this center growing. Our mission is to develop educational and research initiatives related to mining activities, particularly in arid and semi-arid environments. The key components are that we are advised by a technical advisory committee with whom we meet twice a year. They tell us what their needs are, and they listen to what we have done, and we come up with, together, we come up with a plan of how to move ahead. CESM provides opportunities for student training that are unparalleled. Students get to meet industry leaders. They get to go to industry sites and actually do research on site. This is, again, bi-directional research translation to the mining industry because they are helping us as we are helping them. We also supply neutral information coming from academia and tech transfer to policymakers and regulators. I've actually had the wonderful opportunity to testify on the Hill. I've also been to a Senate hearing regarding the Gold King mine spill, and we work routinely with the EPA Region 9 and with the Arizona regulatory agencies. I'd like to briefly tell you about a new paradigm that we've developed in the center based on what we're calling industry academic cooperatives. These cooperatives are partnerships that address critical components of active mining operations. We share information, we share expertise, we solve real problems in the context of trying to reduce operating costs. And we're supported both by state and industry dollars. We meet with these cooperatives meet once a year where we actually share all information. So each site that we work at is reported at these meetings, both in writing and verbally. And we share expertise. And actually the mining companies that are involved have been so helpful in giving us ideas of additional things to try. It's really been an amazing experience. So an example is our Revegetation Research Cooperative, which has really been our best example and really taken off. It was formed in 2013. We are developing below ground biogeochemical indicators of revegetation progress for the mining industry to use as predictive tools. We have currently member industries, including Asarco Mission Mine, KGHM Carlotta Copper, Rio Tinto Resolution Copper, BHP, Grupo Mexico, which is a La Caridad mine in Mexico, and Fresnillo Group is about to sign a contract as well. Every company that has joined us, 3 of these since 2013, comes back and renews their contract every year. It's really been amazing. I just want to show you what a modern copper mine looks like. This is the footprint compared to the paltry 150 acres of mine tailings I showed you for the Iron King mine. These are thousands of acres in size. You can actually see these footprints from outer space. They include mine tailings storage facilities. They include waste rock deposition facilities, and just are huge disturbance of, in fact, the biggest anthropogenic disturbance of land masses in the world. Our objectives are: 1, dust control of fine particulate matter that can cause respiratory issues and complications. Mining has come a long way. They crush and grind finer and finer. So PM 2.5 and PM 10 particulates have really increased in modern mine waste sites. We also aim to develop effective and efficient revegetation tools to return these mine wastes to a productive state. I just want to emphasize that for now, we are really looking at soil cap and plant technology, because that is what is accepted by EPA, and looking at soil caps that range from 6 to 36 inches. We look at using seed mixes that include grasses, shrubs, and trees. We are really looking at challenges to sustainable plant establishment. We are in a semi-arid region with limited precipitation and high evapotranspiration. I can tell you that our experiments that were set up last summer are not looking good because there was no monsoon last summer to even allow the seeds to germinate. In summary, we are identifying robust metrics that are associated with plant establishment. We are looking at the quality of cover material sources and how that impacts plant establishment. And the Revegetation Cooperative, as I mentioned earlier, seems to be a real success and keeps growing. Companies keep asking to be involved. We have several new cooperatives that have been asked for by our technical advisory committee, including a cooperative on erosion control, a cooperative on dust emission and how to prevent dust emission, and a cooperative on community engagement, particularly around issues of mining sustainability. So with that, I haven't named a lot of people throughout this talk, but I hope that this slide gives you an idea of just how many people have been involved in the experiments that I've talked about. It has supported numerous undergraduates in independent studies and on paid projects. It has supported numerous doctorates and postdocs. And I also thank my faculty colleagues for all of their contributions. And you can see that we have a huge list of funders. I'm going to call out the NIHS Superfund Research Program grant because that has been a major funder of this effort. And I would also like to call out our partners, both within Arizona, ATSDR, EPA, and some of the consulting firms that we've worked with. And so with that, I'm going to stop my share and ask you if you have any questions.
So thank you. That was amazing. I mean, it was really interesting. There's a lot that's applicable here. You're available for a few questions, right?
Of course.
I'm going to lead that off with a question. And while the rest of the audience is thinking of questions, we can also give you those icon kind of applauses or real applauses at some point at the very end. But so I happened to be in Guinea last November, not November a couple months ago, but November of 2019. And in Guinea, I visited with some mining sites, and that's one of the biggest, I think, aluminum mining locales in the world. But one thing that's true about our locale, and also I think the ones you were showing us in Arizona and the Southwest, is they're quite arid. They're very dry. That's not the case in Guinea at all. The Guinea site is very wet, and they basically remove the bauxite with agricultural type equipment. They take off the topsoil, which is maybe a couple meters, then they take off the bauxite, which is, I think, maybe 10 meters. With their plows, they take it away, then they put the topsoil back, and I don't think they do much seeding, but 3 months later, it's very richly vegetated, and the vegetation seems to hang around, and then they put trees on it that can have monkeys in it. So the environment when you're doing mining in a very dry location with respect to vegetation, and I'd be interested in your thoughts about that, comparing arid versus wetter locale. I think a lot of what you talked about might not be so applicable in the wetter locales. And yet different mine sites have very different local climates or weathers, which is going to affect this kind of remediation and restoration.
So I agree with you. And, I start out by saying we focus on arid and semi-arid environments. I think it's a huge challenge compared to temperate environments. All the coal mining that goes on, they don't have a lot of trouble revegetating their coal mining areas because they have, it's not that they don't have acid mine drainage issues, they do, but they don't have the trouble we have revegetating. And so I think that understanding the minimum requirements, both in terms of nutrients and microbiome, is going to be key to getting vegetation established on these sites. I wasn't able, I could have talked for hours, right? We actually do a research project at each one of our revegetation co-op member sites. And we are asking exactly the type of question that you just said. What are the minimum requirements needed to establish vegetation? And the reason the mining companies are so interested in this is that they spend maybe $500,000 seeding a 500-acre site, and it works, or it doesn't work. And they don't know why. They don't have a clue why. we're working on one site where you can divide it into quadrants. And each of the quadrants is performing differently, and each of the quadrants received a different type of cover material. So the depth at which you recover that cover material makes a difference. The closer to the surface, the more effective it is at supporting a vegetative cover. The deeper it is below the A horizon, the less well it works. And so the question, but that means that you have to denude a site. To cover 2,000 acres, you have to denude 2,000 acres, right? If you need all topsoil. So we have to figure out ways to meet the nutrition and microbiome requirements of a site in order to get successful revegetation. That was a sort of a long-winded answer to your question.
So thank you. It looks to me like Joe Coulter has a question. And other people who have questions, if you could either raise your hand, I'll watch them, or turn off your microphone. But Joe, the floor is yours.
That was a very good talk. I was interested in the Gold King, not the Iron King, the Gold King mine. And that went into the Animas River, which flows south and then west right through Navajo. Have you developed any strategies to working with tribal communities out there in terms of mitigating these kinds of disasters?
Well, thank you for that question, because boy, do I have a good answer for you. So we, as part of our Superfund program, we have a community engagement core. And the director of our community engagement core is Dr. Carletta Chief, who is Navajo. And the whole community engagement core, as well as a number of other grants that she has gotten since the Gold King mine spill, are focused entirely on supporting the Navajo community and their agriculture, which is irrigated from the San Juan River, right, that the Animas River flows into. So we have put in a tremendous effort working, not me personally, but our Superfund Center and Carletta Chief have put in a tremendous effort at working with these communities. And we have, if anybody's interested, we have a lot of informational material on our Superfund website. And I can send you the link to that. It's not hard to find.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
There are other questions?
We do have questions, Bev. I don't know if we may actually.
Yeah, sure, Robert. Why don't you take 3 questions from your class? You can tell her what class you have.
It's hard because the students now it's 5 o'clock, so they probably went to other classes and labs. So we were here 14 people and plus 7 on the Zoom join. But in a way, I kind of just trying to get some questions. Very good talk. Thank you so much for giving that to us. It really meant a lot because we have a group here who are doing similar kind of projects that you explained. And I just, first off, I'm a plant person. I like to work with plants. And I was wondering, first off, what was the species you used in the first project where you used 10, 15, and 20% organics? And then the other question is kind of more kind of trying to go into situations where in Arizona, you might have probably trouble establishing bigger vascular plants in a shorter amount of time. But what about cryptogamic crust? Are you having any kind of ideas on that? So it's two probably very different questions, but.
Yep. So
and then I have a student here who will ask questions too. Thanks.
Okay. We did an initial study in the greenhouse. I told you we worked for several years in the greenhouse before going to the field. And we must have screened 30 native plants or so and came up with a mix of 6 plants that we seeded at the Iron King site. And of those 6 plants, 3 were successful. Atroplex was the most successful, and then buffalo grass, and then mesquite. And so those seem to be able to tolerate the conditions pretty well, those 3. As to cryptobiotic crusts, great idea, but we have not worked with them. They're very, very slow growing and sort of finicky to establish, I think. So we have not done a lot of work with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this question. I mean, we are similarly, I think, approaching the question with, finding those workhorse species up here in Montana that could work well. And we also shortlisted it from like a lot of plants down to a handful or a couple of handfuls.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
very good. Thank you. So I'm actually giving you a student, Paul Helfrich, who will like to ask you a question too.
Hi there. So you mentioned at the end of the presentation that more modern milling techniques produce a finer dust. Would you say that, like, as you work on more modern areas, do you think that finer material poses is it more difficult to restore, or would you say those more modern approaches make things less difficult to restore?
Oh, that's a great question. So, so finer particulates are more difficult when you get to things like water holding capacity, right? But modern approaches take out all the metals. So metals are not a problem in modern mining sites. So I'm going to say I think modern mining sites are easier than legacy sites. But they pose different health issues than than legacy sites. But I'm not sure I can give you a really great answer on which is easier to restore.
No, that makes sense. Different issues for different sites. I appreciate that.
Different sites. And there's never going to be a site that repeats itself. And that's why we believe that the biomarkers that we're developing are so critical, that you need to have certain amounts of nitrogen, you need to have certain amounts of carbon, you need to have a certain microbiome makeup. And if you have those, you're likely to succeed.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Raina. Good job. Thank you so much.
Do
You have a question as well?
any more questions, Robert?
Yes, there is another student's question. Is that okay?
Yeah, but the students should both should introduce themselves and say like what they're majoring in and what their name is. That would be nice, just quickly. And we'll take one last question from the student, and then we will all turn off our microphones, and we can all clap or put those little clapping hands in your picture.
Hi, George Allen, Interdisciplinary Studies. I'm the Snidely Whiplash in the group. I'm a prospector and a miner looking for sustainable, healthy solutions. And my questions will often be about costs. So where do I go to find the range of costs involved in new mining operations, and those who are the most healthy investment partners in the mining community? How do I find out about the costs for the restoration projects?
So not for actually the mining projects, but for restoration afterwards. Is that correct?
That's correct. Planning up front for restoration at the end.
So, I think a lot of the restoration is done by consulting companies. We are represented by Cedar Creek Associates on our TAC, and also Golder Associates. So these are the people who are the workhorses of implementing the remediations and would have cost information. So I would.
Yeah, Georges, I mean, one of the things is, are mining companies now thinking of the restoration afterwards when they're planning it?
Oh, they have to. They have to. So these $50 million projects, before you've even broken ground, have made the risks of investing in a mine so large that new mines have to have soup to nuts before they're allowed to take a step forward. And yes, they have to have all of their remediation plans in place before they're allowed to get any kind of permits. We have the Rosemont mine that is being proposed here in Arizona, and it's going back and forth as to whether it will be allowed to move ahead or not. They have a complete restoration plan in place.
Okay,
So-
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone, you're welcome to turn off your mutes, turn on your mics so we can give Raina a great round of applause. And thank you so much. That is what, and I hope that many of you will decide to join us next week when Sarah Baganskis from Temple University is going to talk about using surface water modeling to address water management challenges in the Pajaro Valley in California, as well as in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So that's what's up next week. And so thanks all for coming, and see you next week.